Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening: the Sensex and the Nifty end flat once again after a range-bound session. Mid-caps outperform. The rupee remains largely steady against the dollar but near record lows. Sanjay Malhotra takes charge as India's 26th RBI governor, promises to maintain stability, policy continuity and a consultative approach.
Inflation globally is a big challenge. But inflation, as you know, doesn't respect borders.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says inflation is the biggest challenge globally and no country can tackle it in isolation. Inflation in India breached RBI's tolerance level of 6% in October. MobiKwik's 572 crore rupee IPO fully subscribed within an hour of the issue opening. The fintech giant had cut its issue size by 70% in the run-up to the IPO. The top management tells CNBC-TV18 they reduced the issue size as they had scaled up substantially in revenue. The Supreme Court issues a contempt notice to Axis Bank MD Amitabh Chaudhry and the managing director of a Reliance Infra subsidiary. This after the DMRC filed a plea accusing the companies of willfully disobeying the court's order to refund 4,500 crores. However, the court exempts the managing directors from personally appearing for the next hearing. Government and opposition continue to spar in Parliament. The Rajya Sabha is adjourned after ruckus over no confidence motion against Chairman Jagdeep Dhankar. Rahul Gandhi meets Lok Sabha Speaker seeking to expunge alleged defamatory remarks made by BJP MP Nishikant Dubey against him and Sonia Gandhi. Government data shows a conviction rate of just 6.4% in cases filed under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act in the last 5 years. Only 28% of the cases reached the trial stage. Congress leader Randeep Surjewala accuses the government of misusing the Enforcement Directorate against opposition parties. Syria's newly appointed interim Prime Minister appeals for calm and stability as refugees continue to return. Shops and banks reopen in Damascus amidst Israeli strikes on military infrastructure. India evacuates 75 citizens from Syria. A report by Kalari Capital lays bare the gender bias in startup funding. Only 16% of all capital raised is allocated to startups with women co-founders. Just 8% of startups are run by female CEOs. Well, let's start with the market action. The Sensex and the Nifty ending the day flat after a range-bound session. Mid-cap index did manage to outperform the blue chips, even though the gains were limited. The Nifty closing 31 points higher, the Sensex 16 points higher, the Nifty Bank in the red, and the mid-cap index up by about 150 points today. In the money market, the rupee largely steady against the dollar, but it remains near record lows. The 10-year sovereign bond also declining in trade today, so that is the money market action for you. The big story this evening: Sanjay Malhotra has taken charge as the 26th RBI governor in Mumbai. The former revenue secretary has been appointed for a 3-year tenure. Speaking at his first press conference after taking charge, Malhotra said the Reserve Bank will continue to uphold the principles of policy stability and continuity. He's also called for a strong collaboration between banks, financial institutions and governments to ensure wider financial inclusion.
I will continue to uphold the legacy and take it forward. I am aware that the RBI in its 90th year has given to itself the theme of stability, trust and growth. All these three, I think, very, very apt pillars on which to work.
Well, that is the new RBI governor. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said inflation is the biggest challenge globally and no country can tackle it in isolation. Speaking at a CII event, the Finance Minister said that global supply chains will have to be realigned. She added that the immediate priority of the governments across the world should be to restore calm and normalcy. Take a look.
First of all, the attempt both of industry and governments everywhere should be to restore some global calm, restore some normalcy. No way can there be enough justifiable reason for skirmishes or war. Inflation globally is a big challenge, but inflation, as you know, doesn't respect borders. Inflation is so contagious that nowhere is any country's effort today is completely successful, because beyond its powers are inflation forces which come in. And therefore, the primary cause, I would think, is the disruption, the skirmish, the war, and as a result, World is facing a challenge.
Well, that is the Finance Minister on inflation. Meanwhile, the Chief Economic Advisor, Anantha Nageswaran, called on regulators to be cautious of their unelected powers. Speaking at the same event as the Finance Minister, the CA said regulators must be transparent and also subject themselves to the same rules as the entities that they regulate. Responding to a question on cryptocurrencies and regulation, Anantha Nageswaran said regulators should not stand in the way of innovation, but he also added that regulators must be wary of the costs and benefits of technologies like cryptocurrencies. Take a look.
I think in general, we need to be very sure what are the criteria we want to set up for the regulator to be not standing in the way of so-called innovations. We are a low-income country and we have extensive amount of financial illiteracy, which is of course true in developed countries as well. So in that situation, how do we distinguish between not standing in the way of moonshots and in which sectors do we have to be more conscious of social costs and benefits, whether it is crypto, bitcoins, and online gaming, etc. So in some sense, regulators have to be conscious of the limits of their unelected power. They are unelected power, and by definition, unelected powers are normally not held as accountable as elected powers are. So they have to impose it upon themselves. In other words, there has to be an accountability on the part of the regulator, and they have to be conscious of the fact that they represent unelected power, and therefore that responsibility to wield power consciously is also something that we should demand of regulators.
Well, that's the Chief Economic Advisor. Now on to IPOs. Vishal Mega Mart's 8,000 crore rupee IPO was subscribed 40% on the first day of bidding as of 4 p.m. The portion reserved for non-institutional investors was subscribed the most and followed by the retail portion. The company raked in 2,400 crore rupees from anchor investors. The IPO is entirely an offer for sale and no fresh issuance of equity. The 572 crore rupee initial public offer of MobiKwik was fully subscribed within an hour of the issue's opening. The company's public issue is entirely a fresh issuance of equity shares with no offer for sale component. Speaking to CNBC-TV18, MobiKwik's management said that the IPO size was reduced as the company had scaled up substantially in revenue. Remember, the fintech giant had gradually cut its size by 70% in the run-up to the IPO. Take a look.
You can see the company has scaled up substantially. Further, in our March 24 numbers, we have also given an EBITDA positive of 37 crores and a PAT of 14-15 crores. So the company has started generating cash and the company has scaled up. And this is why we decided to have an IPO for smaller size this time, because we have already scaled up substantially without raising that capital in the last 3 years.
Well, that's MobiKwik. And staying with IPOs, TPG Capital-backed Sai Life Sciences public issues and subscribed 83% on the first day so far. The portion reserved for qualified institutional buyers was fully subscribed, followed by retail investors. The company's IPO comprises a fresh issuance of shares amounting to 950 crores. That is Sai Life Sciences. Now, the Supreme Court has issued a contempt notice to Axis Bank and Amitabh Chaudhary and the Managing Director of Delhi Airport Metro Express, a Reliance Infra subsidiary. This comes after the DMRC filed a plea accusing it of willfully disobeying the court's order to refund 4,500 crore rupees from the escrow account. Axis Bank had maintained the account on behalf of the Delhi Metro Corporation. Ashmit is standing by now to take us through the details of what the top court has said. Ashmit, what does this mean now for both Axis Bank as well as the Reliance Infra subsidiary?
Well, they're staring at a contempt notice. The Supreme Court is asking them, show cause to the apex court why contempt action should not be initiated against you. That's the question being posed to Axis Bank, its MD Amitabh Chaudhary, to the Reliance Infra subsidiary as well as the subsidiary's MD. This issue travels back to the month of April of 2024 when the apex court had decided this arbitration dispute in favor of the Delhi Metro Corporation. That was an 8,000 crore rupee arbitration. And as a part of that judgment which had come in the month of April, the Supreme Court had said that any money that has been deposited by DMRC needs to be refunded. Now, DMRC, Delhi Metro Corp, had deposited a sum of 2,800 crore rupees, which, along with the interest when computed, adds up to 4,500 crore rupees. That's the amount that DMRC has been seeking a recovery of. And DMRC essentially, by way of filing this application, saying that all their efforts directed towards the Reliance Infra subsidiary, directed towards the Axis Bank, have not yielded results. The money has not come their way. That 4,500 crore rupees continues to sit in an escrow account, and that money has not been refunded to them, that this is in willful default of the Supreme Court order, willful defiance of the Supreme Court order, and therefore is tantamount to contempt of court. The Supreme Court just issuing notice at this stage, importantly, also issuing an exemption to Amitabh Chaudhary. He needn't appear before the next date of hearing, but they do have a short window. 4 weeks' time is what they've been given to respond, to show cause as to why no contempt action should be initiated against the two of them, Reliance Infra-subsidiary and Axis Bank. Back to you.
All right, Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. Now, the government is looking to set up a new council to boost defence exports. Sources have told us that the new Export Promotion Council will work towards capitalising export opportunities in the sector, and many global defence companies have expressed interest in shifting their production lines to India. Abhimanyu is standing by now with more details. Abhimanyu, what is the government working towards?
India's domestic defence production has risen by 174% since the last decade, and the government is looking to capitalise on the export opportunities in the defence equipment and production sector. Government sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the government is looking at the possibility of creating a separate export promotion council under the Department of Commerce to help fine-tune strategy as well as identify challenges and opportunities for existing and potential exporters of defence equipment. Also, sources have indicated that many big global defence OEMs have also expressed interest to invest as well as produce defence equipment in India. It remains to be seen what are going to be the contours of the scheme as and when it is going to be implemented by the government. Also, India aims to reach 1.75 lakh crore rupees in the current FY in defence equipment production. And as far as the target for 2029 is concerned, India aims to achieve rupees 3 lakh crores in defence production and defence exports worth rupees 50,000 by 2029. As of now, India exports defence equipment to around 100 countries, with the US, France and Armenia as top 3 destinations for exports in the last FY.
Abhimanyu, many thanks. Now, Syria's newly appointed interim Prime Minister Mohammed al-Bashir has formed an interim government in the country. This is talks between old regime officers and newcomers are still ongoing. Speaking to the local media, al-Bashir said Syrians are looking for stability and calm, adding that he was currently working towards restoring public services and infrastructure. The interim Prime Minister is also known to be a close ally of rebel group leader Abu Muhammad al-Julani. India has evacuated 76 citizens from Syria. The Foreign Minister said the evacuees include 44 pilgrims from Jammu and Kashmir who were stranded in the country. Meanwhile, Syria's capital city of Damascus has seen banks and shops reopen for the first time since the fall of the al-Assad government. Several international humanitarian groups have called for countries to urgently step up funding to aid the rebuilding efforts. Meanwhile, the US has said that its troops will stay in Syria as part of the counter-terrorism mission against ISIS.
Those troops are there for a very specific and important reason, not as some sort of bargaining chip. They're there, have been there now for the better part of a decade or more to fight ISIS, a terrorist group that threatened not just the United States, but many of our partners and allies all around the world, including in Europe and in the region.
The situation is obviously very volatile in Syria. It is very good that Assad is gone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what follows is settled by any means at all. It is really important we talk to our regional allies, our global allies, about the way forward, which has to be a political way forward. And that does mean, to answer your question, a rejection of terrorism, a rejection of violence. So we have to be really clear about the terms. Very early days.
And staying with tensions in West Asia, at least 13 Palestinians have been killed as Israeli forces continue to attack Gaza. This attack comes hours after 20 people were killed by Israeli military in northern Gaza. Medics have also confirmed that Israeli forces killed 7 people and wounded dozens after attacking a house in central Gaza. We'll end to a break, but up next, the government and opposition continue to spar in Parliament. The Rajya Sabha is adjourned after ruckus over a no-confidence motion against the chairman, Jagdeep Dhankar. That and more when we return. Well, here's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. The GST rate rationalisation proposed by the group of ministers has received a lukewarm response from states. Timsy standing by with more details. Timsy, we are now getting closer to that crucial GST Council meeting. What's the indication that you get on those proposed rate changes?
Well, that's right. What we are going to understand from sources is that the proposed GST rate changes by a group of ministers is getting some sort of a lukewarm response, is what we are given to understand. The states are wary of rate changes, and these are some of the non-GOM member states who are not in agreement with the proposals that have been put out by the group of ministers on rate rationalization. Sources further say that these states are wary of rate changes given that the current timing, according to them, is not correct. And they say that this time, due to economic conditions, should be kept in mind, and these rate changes should be either delayed or being considered later on. These states are likely to question the timing of these proposals. They may also ask GST Council to wait for consumption pickup before these rates are changed. Also, these states are likely to agree to the proposals, meanwhile, on the rationalization of the rates on life and health insurance premia. They feel that probably government should first take the first step, that is reducing rates on life and health insurance, and then later on consider the overhauling of all the rates. Remember, the 55th GST Council is likely to meet on 21st December in Jaisalmer, and the group of ministers on rate rationalization is likely to submit its report. Also, the other group of ministers on health and life insurance is also likely to submit its report, which will be in detail discussed in the upcoming council meeting. Let's see what happens finally.
All right, Timsy, many thanks. Now, the government and opposition continue to spar in Parliament. The Rajya Sabha was adjourned for the day after the House witnessed chaos over the opposition's no-confidence motion against the chairman, Jagdeep Dhankar. Parliamentary Affairs Minister Kiran Rijiju has called the allegations baseless, going on to say that the international media has linked Congress leader Sonia Gandhi to billionaire George Soros. Lok Sabha leader of the opposition, Rahul Gandhi, met with Speaker Om Birla and urged a discussion on all crucial matters. He also asked the Speaker to expunge the defamatory remarks made by BJP MP Nishikant Dubey against him. The Parliament premises also stood witness to a unique protest ahead of the session. Opposition MPs greeted NDA lawmakers with roses and the Indian tricolour in the morning. Many opposition MPs carried placards that read, and I quote, "Don't let the country be sold." The opposition has been demanding a discussion on the bribery allegations levelled against the Adani Group in the US. India bloc leaders held a joint press conference in the capital. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge has accused Dhankar of working as the biggest spokesperson of the government.
देखिए, ये उल्टे सीधे एक्यूजेशन लगाते रहते हैं, मगर हमने डिसीजन लिया है, एटलीस्ट मेरी थिंकिंग है कि ये जो भी प्रोवोकेशन करें इनको हम करने देंगे, बट हम हाउस को रन कराएंगे।
उपराष्ट्रपति का पद को, उपराष्ट्रपति का गरिमा को अगर आप लोग अटैक करेंगे तो हम बिल्कुल बचाव करेंगे। सोनिया गांधी जी और सोरोस का लिंक का जो नाम आ रहा है, हमने ये लिंक नहीं किया है, ये रिपोर्ट हमारा नहीं है। अंतरराष्ट्रीय जगत में, पूरा दुनिया में ये रिपोर्ट पढ़ रहा है।
The chair should give same respect as to the leader of the house. We are fed up with his behavior and his partiality. That's why we have brought this resolution.
And Congress MP Randeep Surjewala hitting out at the BJP-led government, claiming misuse of Enforcement Directorate through the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Government data showed a conviction rate of 6.4% in cases filed under the PMLA in the last 5 years. Citing the government's reply to his question, Surjewala said only 28% of the cases reached the trial stage, while 72% cases are still pending. He accused the government of undertaking a blatant witch hunt against opposition parties. And before we wrap, a report by Kalari Capital lays bare the gender bias in startup funding. Only 16% of all the capital raised has been allocated to startups with women co-founders. Ritu is here with more. Ritu.
Kalari Capital's CXXO State of the Female Entrepreneurship in India report highlights the steady rise of women in India's startup ecosystem, including in Tier 2 and beyond cities, yet stark disparities remain. Between January of 2022 and October this year, it finds only 16% of all the capital that was raised was allocated to startups with women co-founders. Even more concerning, barely 8% of startups today are led by female CEOs. While 19 women-founded startups have reached unicorn status, only 3 have females at the helm. Now, the funding disparity remains one of the most pressing challenges, where the report finds startups co-founded by women consistently received smaller check sizes, approximately half the average received by male-led ventures. Picture this, out of every 100 rupees that is invested in startups, only 4 rupees goes to startups that are led by female CEOs. Encouragingly, however, the report points to a notable increase in the number of women-led startups that are emerging from Tier 2 and beyond cities. So female-led startups in these regions saw a growth rate of 1.41 times compared to 1.07 times for male-led startups. But funding still lags behind their male counterparts. The report also examines the biases within the investment ecosystem, where it says, while 80% investors acknowledge that gender plays a role in evaluating startups, only half are committed to improving gender diversity in their deal flow. The report finds 75% of investors, in fact, evaluated only 1 to 3 female-led startups per quarter compared to more than 50 male-led startups. And to level the playing field, the report suggests promoting STEM education for women, increasing female investors, boosting visibility for female founders, and creating inclusive mentorship networks.
All right, Ritu, many thanks for joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.